Yeah, there was a sticker I saw as I walked down to, in the hospital to visit mom, and it just had a circle and it had in it, "You are enough."
Yeah.
And this goes back to a couple of things that we've kind of harped, and I think it's important for us to say. We're talking, I hope, to lots of caregivers who might be in this situation. And, there's such a thing as caregiver burnout. This is in the chart. It actually showed up when I did the research for this. You can't pour from an empty cup.
How's it going?
Welcome to Snowmageddon. Yeah, we haven't gotten this kind of snow in a long time, and I think it's going to get bigger than minute by minute. I started around 7:30 in the morning, and now it's covered most things. It's got big flakes coming down and
Yeah,
blowing to
it's
the
getting.
side and swirling around. So hey,
And if y'all are watching on YouTube, you can look right back at my window over here
yeah,
and see
right
it's all
there.
white. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that is
That doesn't
crazy.
happen too often.
Not here.
Yeah. My goodness. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm taking my own experiences and kind of putting them in helpful tips. Part of me is like, I wish I didn't have this experience, but still, you learn some stuff when you go through it.
Tell us about what's been going on.
Well, so first of all, my mom is okay. Let me start off that way.
Yeah.
But a couple
We
of
always
weeks
ask,
ago,
how's your mom?
she's doing good.
Yeah.
But she did have a minor stroke about 11 days ago,
Yeah.
as this podcast goes, which won't mean much to people viewing it, I guess. And it's a minor stroke. It was on her right temple, and that affects your left side because the brain switches. And we have had to do some rehab. So I have some things that I can affirm, and also did some research on about caregiving and what do you do when post stroke. And I think they're pretty cool, and I think they'll spark some conversation. um so taking a little bit of what's happened to my mom that's not good and saying, okay, well, here's how you handle it, caregivers, if this happens to you. And so I can get into that. We can certainly talk about that, and then I've also dropped some things into the show notes, thank you, Barry, that will kind of give you a good guide if you're going through this. There's some things you need to look for. Certainly things, and I think this could start off right now. If you're having a stroke, if you think your loved one's having a stroke, there is no time to think, well, maybe should we go to the doctor? The answer is you should go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Any
There's no question
signs
about
of a
that
stroke.
for sure.
And so be aware of that. Sudden changes in speech, vision, balance, strength. If you see something that looks like a seizure, don't assume it is. Take them to the hospital and make sure you get the right diagnosis from a professional. Any confusion, extreme sleepiness, that's pain, shortness of breath, can almost feel like they're having a heart attack, which is still another reason to go to the ER. Any severe headaches, swallowing problems, which is something unusual that you may not associate with stroke. And, any signs of infections or fever or UTI or pneumonia or anything like that. When in doubt, you always go to the emergency room and have them check you out.
So, it's our listeners here may not know what went on, and so I thought I would just ask you some questions about your mom's situation, and you can answer what you want to, or say that's private. I don't want to talk about that. But I think maybe teasing it out a little bit might help. I know you, like you said earlier, your mom had a small stroke. How'd you find out about it? What brought you to it?
Well, that is so I won't get into too many details, but I was not in town. So I
Uh-huh.
had a caregiver who was there who called me and said, something's happening. I think she had already called 911, which is
Right.
the
Great.
smart thing to do.
Sure.
But she was telling me a little bit about it. And I was actually on the phone as mom was experiencing it. So
Wow.
that was a little scary. And at the time, we didn't think it was stroke. We thought it was seizure. So we
Okay.
thought, okay, this is another one related to some another disease. She has Parkinson's. And I also found out that Parkinson's uh, and Alzheimer's are kind of like partners walking in the same halls. They show up in similar circumstances. So as I was talking to people in the hospital later, I found out that most people in early Alzheimer's may get associated with Parkinson's too.
Interesting.
So that was interesting to learn. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
I was in the middle of that, dealing with what is this? And like I said, my caretaker had did the right thing. She didn't call me first. She called 911 first, and we were simply waiting on them getting there. and
Well,
they
I know
took
that
her
kinda had to
in.
give you a little bit of a solace right there that you knew somebody was with her.
Yeah,
You know it was already being taken care of. Now here's an odd question for you. How did you keep yourself from having a stroke at about this time when you
I was focusing on making sure that I asked right questions, that I didn't get emotional, and it was very difficult. But we were of the opinion that this was a seizure, and that she came out of it very quickly. So that's the other thing is it doesn't have to be this long event. It was about a minute, which felt forever to me. But then she started responding to people before people got there. So that's typical of minor stroke. That it's not long, it's not debilitating. Now, if it had been major, she might not have come out of it until after they applied medication. And you might have heard the medication they use on major strokes to relieve it. It's called a stroke buster. They put something in their blood stream that will undo a clot or something like this. This is probably not what this was. And that helped me.
Yeah, yeah, just knowing
You
that.
know me for a while. Tend not to get it when I go under critical situations. I tend to get more analytical, which can be
Mhm.
good and bad. You have to watch out for signs of that. But it was. I guess we're getting into the idea. If you're in the middle of this, you have to remain calm because where I was, there was nothing I could do other than offer advice, other than be reassuring to my caretaker who was also having a little trouble watching mom go through this. Yeah,
Sure.
it was interesting to go through that particular situation. And, if you've never done that before, keep in mind, you're not helping if you're emotional, if you don't have the right, you have to calm yourself down and realize you got to get through this. There'll be time for that kind of thing afterwards. And I did that too. There were
Oh,
times I looked, okay, this is, you know, mom having a particular event. So I don't know if that was too much or not too little,
no, no,
but
no. I think
yeah,
that was
it
good.
was an interesting point of view, especially since I couldn't do anything but offer advice and reassure.
Yeah, because you're a little ways away, and
Yeah.
not knowing what's going on too. It makes me think about there's a line from Ted Lasso that didn't have anything to do with anything medical, but I think it applies to a lot of things. Is don't freak out till you find out.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's hard to do. I know it's hard to do because your brain wants to go solve this problem, wants to analyze it, wants to know what's going on, and that's just super tough. So once you got in touch, found out what the diagnosis was. So what typically came after that? What did the doctors recommend and that kind of thing?
Well, it was my mother lives about a minute and a half from the hospital. I mean, we're very close. So
Man, that's
they were in
fortunate.
the place in no time. And keeping in contact with that caregiver, my caregiver, who gave me updates, was a forced effort. You have to keep asking questions. You have to, she knows to text me and things like that. And then we had to have the right paperwork in place so that the doctors knew that we were supposed to get the right information. And so I had done that before, and when my mom went to the hospital back in April. And so I knew that this hospital had all that paperwork in store. And I thought to myself, the tip that I guess that most people are going through is make sure you have that paperwork ready. If you're in a situation where, or you have a medical power of attorney or something like that, it has to be registered with the local authority and it has to be registered with the hospital. So make sure you do that as a prep. If I hadn't done that, doing that from where I was would have been difficult and made a lot of. So that we've talked about those kind of papers before in previous podcasts, but it's really important to have that stuff already done. So now you can focus on the problem and not the access.
Yeah, not the access. That's a really good advice. If you have a hospital nearby that you know that'd be your hospital, it would be a good thing to go ahead and do that and have it in
Yeah.
place. I wonder too if they would in the throes of something like that, would they accept an electronic copy? Would they just have to have
No,
paper? They just
no.
have to have paper. Wow.
They want
My
the
goodness.
original copy. And so I had gone through that before where I actually got the original copy, showed it, made them a copy of that. They saw it and they had it
Yep.
registered at the hospital.
Wow. Yeah.
Some places do, but this hospital did not. So, that's something you want to get through and do that when you're not in a time of crisis. That's a problem.
Cool. Well, that's a good to know also. So I think from that, I'm sure they did whatever they needed to do to get her stabilized. And then at some point in time, I think you talked about rehab. So where did
Yeah.
that
So
go?
there's a cool chart we put into the show notes that it has some talking points on it that I want to just kind of hit because I think it's a way to talk about them in a way that makes a lot of sense. So there's some things that happen with strokes that you have to pay attention to. So Things like mobility and weakness, speech difficulties, swallowing problems. Again, I didn't realize that it was in there. Things with memory and thinking, emotional changes. So here's a couple of things. With mobility and weakness, it's recovery isn't about speed, it's about consistency. So
Mhm.
what you want to do is make sure that your loved one gets into a rehab program that consistently does things that will improve her recovery mode. So strokes, if you don't know what a stroke is, I think most people do, but just in case, it is it's when the blood vessels in your brain either bleed or they are clogged in a way that prevents oxygen getting into your brain's blood cells. Depending on what point in your brain that attacks, that can attack different things. Like your brain has pretty autonomic things that do things like beat your heart and breathe. When you want to walk, it knows how to do that. When you want to remember things, it recalls those items. So a stroke can cause issues with all of those kinds of activities. And recovery from that is rewiring your brain to do those same things, to relearn a lot of those same things. And depending on how bad the stroke is, you have to do more of that. And the real point of that whole statement is it's not it's not recovery fast. It is about recovery early and consistent. So they
Mhm.
have to be in a program. And basically, my mom went into rehab where she's doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy every day.
Gotcha.
And if you don't do it every day, as you get away from the event, your brain becomes less and less able to recover from that. So
Mhm.
having mom in a place where a nurse came in every morning and said, okay, it's time to do OT. It's time to do physical therapy. It's time to do speech therapy was good. This is not the kind of thing you do on your own. It's not the kind of thing you do without a professional.
Yep. You need
So
somebody there who's measuring you constantly and helping you through the bumps and that kind of thing. So I guess and to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to interpret what you're saying here, but I believe it sounds like you have to rebuild the pathways that not necessarily rebuild the pathways, but if you had pathways in your brain function that got destroyed as part of that stroke, you have to rebuild new ones essentially. So
rebuild them,
you're
strengthen them, that
yep.
kind of thing. So the other thing
Mhm.
is swallowing, and what goes along with mobility are things like squeezing your hand, holding on to objects, picking up a fork, those kinds of things. So those are things that are over time. We've done that all our lives. So they're automatic places in our brains that know what a fork is, picks it up, knows how to use it. And all we have to do is direct it, right? The rest of that
Mhm.
stuff is sort of built autonomously in your head. When you have a stroke, you may lose that capability and have to relearn some of those things. And so now it
Right.
becomes difficult to tell the difference between a fork and a spoon and a knife, and what you do with one and how you use it. And depending on the severity of the stroke, you can lose lots of things that you would have normally done without thinking. Certainly things like driving, but at this point, my mom and my other loved ones are not driving anymore. But you can tell those kind of autonomic things that you build over time, you lose them. And even if you could get them back, you may be very slow to get them back. So your reaction time to recovering from a fall might be pretty bad after an incident like this. And I guess I should say, hey, we're not doctors, we're not therapists, but we're just giving you the perspective of a caregiver. So you always want to couple this with a doctor who has examined your loved one to tell you what it is medically they're dealing with. So there's a lot of good information in our show notes that talks about the difference between isonemic and hemorrhagic that I'm not going to get into because I couldn't tell you the difference between those two, but without beating it anymore. But you want to have a conversation with your primary care person, the ER doctor, and you probably got a rehab doctor that goes along with that you should talk to. And then, believe it or not, there is a caseworker that talks to you about, well, okay, what do we do to help you in your rehabilitation plan? Was it going to another facility, getting more equipment, doing specialized therapy? What's the
Yep.
plan and how do you react to that? And that you
Even
should have
long-term
that
people coming
conversation more than once.
in-house also, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Most places have that kind of thing. So my mom is going to do multiple places over time, and we're trying
Mhm.
to get her as much therapy as possible. But that was me talking to my caseworker and my doctor pretty frequently about how she's doing and the rehab she's doing and how we should react to that. So this is not something they can do by themselves. This is where they'll need you as a caregiver, need you as a loved one to be right by there, and maybe even making some decisions for them because it will be difficult for them to kind of get the whole grasp of that when they're in recovery. So yeah, you got to be careful.
So with all the rehab, so how does insurance and Medicare and that kind of stuff fit into this situation?
Yeah, and the caseworkers can help you with this. Now, if you live in South Carolina, United States, my mom was a state employee for many years, and her state insurance has a lot of good benefits. And one of the things it does pretty well is rehabilitation from stroke. So my mom has an insurance setup where you can have up to 100 days in a facility, and either her insurance pays most of it, or if it doesn't, then things like our federal systems, if you're out of country, will pay the other pieces that aren't the that. So I think it's like an 80-20 rule up to 20 days. So 100 days is a good bit, and especially for a minor event. It
Hmm.
may not be enough for something major, and so you have to be careful of that. So ask the questions of your insurance provider. What happens if you have these things: heart attack, stroke, AFib, those kinds of things that may have some recovery in them. For me, I'm managing those 100 days very carefully. I'm going to try to get her, the first 20 days, and then we'll probably save it. And then there's a time period that you have to be in a rest home or your home. I think it's 60 for where we're at, where those counters we set.
Okay, gotcha.
Having a conversation with your caseworker about that, who can look at your insurance and tell you what the terms are, is really important.
Help
You
you
don't want to
manage the
burn through your
logistics.
days all at once. You want to know that you have them. So, because recovery after a stroke is better if it's done at the early stages. You don't want to wait a month and then start rehabilitation. That's you've lost a lot of opportunity if you've done that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When you were talking about recovery, it made me think about I have a friend from high school. Actually, her dad had a stroke a few years ago, actually a year or two ago, and he's a musician. He's been playing guitar like a madman for 50 years. And she was telling me after the fact that the part of where the side of his brain, I guess it was the right side, he had his, and it affected his left. It affected his left side, and being a guitar player, she said he could strum like a madman, but he couldn't work the left hand
Yeah.
to handle the fretboard for a while after that. I think he's coming back and he's getting where he can play a little bit now, but that's been, I think that was really tough for him because that was his outlet. His thing to
Yeah.
do. Yeah. So
It's actually pretty interesting because speech therapy also goes with memory. So the speech therapist, when with my mom, is asking her questions about her family, what it was like to be a child, and getting her to talk through that also helps her work the memory nodes of those items too. So it was interesting. I didn't expect that when I came in and watched some of that therapy, that the young man who did it with her would go into her history. Keep in mind, you have to remember that she may not be remembering everything correctly,
true,
but the
true.
act of doing it is a therapy in itself. So
Yeah.
that
Pulling
was an
something
interesting
from
little
memory
guy.
regardless and this helps out. I see. That's cool.
Tell you
Well,
the other thing I work that I realize now is you have to work in the idea that they are impaired, and so fatigue and listlessness and even the reluctance to do this is built into the rehab process. So you should expect it. You should plan for it. Don't be annoyed by it. It is part of their healing process. It's not stubbornness. Uh, just keep in mind that you're helping your loved one through a maze that they have now entered. Yeah, it seems like they should know how to use a fork, but guess what? Some of those skills are probably degraded, and you got to be patient with that and remind yourself of that.
man, well, that sounds like that was a tough thing. It's probably ongoing tough thing for a little while, but
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that I got a little bit that makes me realize how important prevention is on this is that there are medications out there that prevent stroke. It
mhm.
turns out in our particular area, we had to balance two things, and we to reduce the medication, but the liability, things like Rybelsus and blood thinner, things, not Rybelsus, Eliquis, to prevent stroke like this are important. So if you're in that situation where you're considering someone who's on a blood thinner, keep in mind that if you decrease that item, you increase their chances of a stroke.
It's all a balance. It's all a
Yeah,
balance.
it is. Yeah, you learn a lot of things like you need to address their pain because sometimes they may not be able to focus it. You may have to talk to them in a different way. I mean, there's a lot of great tips on that chart that I think make a lot of sense for caregivers. One, kind of put it in context for us. If you haven't dealt with that before, if your loved one has a risk for it, read through it because it might jar something that will help you out in a moment of crisis.
And just to remind everybody, that is in our Care Tech and Tips research Google Doc, and we'll put a link to it in the description and in the show notes so you can get right to it.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to get to, but it's there and it has all the show notes from all of our episodes. So you can kind of go through and pick and choose if there's anything else from the older episodes that you might need. All right. I think we covered that one pretty well, you think? And anything else you can think to add?
Yeah, there was a sticker I saw as I walked down to, in the hospital to visit mom, and it just had a circle and it had in it, "You are enough."
Yeah.
And this goes back to a couple of things that we've kind of harped, and I think it's important for us to say. We're talking, I hope, to lots of caregivers who might be in this situation. And, there's such a thing as caregiver burnout. This is in the chart. It actually showed up when I did the research for this. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Hmm.
So you got to take time for yourself. You got to take breaks. You got to join other groups like you're doing here. And you got to understand that you're going to be irritable and feel guilt about that. And I certainly did, and talk to people about that. So address your burnout because your burnout is going to affect their recovery, believe it or not. So I think it's an important thing to say. I found myself caught up in that, and some family members helped me through that. Actually, Barry did too sometimes. So, you got to realize that you're a human. And when you're in that point where you're the weakest, maybe time for you to step away, do something to get your mind off of it, recharge, fill your cup up so that you can pour it back out for your loved one when they need it. So
I think that's
just
good
manage that.
advice. Very good advice. I mean, your strength, your energy, and your patience are all finite resources,
They
and
are.
you don't want to deplete all of those. Self control, throw that one in there too. All of those are
Yeah.
finite resources, and you have to replenish them from time to time. And you don't want them disappearing at the wrong times. So you have to fill your car or your truck up every once in a while with gas to get to the next place. You got to do that for you too.
You got to do that for this too.
Yeah, I get it for sure. My goodness gracious. Well,
We
this is
started
I'm
on the
gonna
heavy side, didn't we? I didn't mean
yeah,
to
we
do
did,
that, but
but I'm gonna say this. This is kind of along those lines, but this is just an old adage that we have in our house about a lot of things. January suck. They just suck. That's all. That's all there is to it. It happens every year. At least in our group, if we feel like if we can make it through January unscathed, then we feel pretty good about the rest of the year.
yeah,
I
that
just
that
have
makes a lot of
in
sense
my
now.
family, going back to grandparents and aunts and uncles and stuff like that, lots of bad things have happened in January. I don't know why. It just seems to be the case. There's a lot of things that are going on in there. My dad is, as a lot of you know, is a minister, and he is just over 80, but he finds himself still out there going to take care of other people, and I really love that about him, and get annoyed about him all at the same time a lot of times, because I'm afraid sometimes that he in his journey to go help these other people, he doesn't take care of himself and he doesn't realize that he's 80.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes that's kind of tough, but it
Sometimes the caregiver needs a caregiver.
yeah. So he's doing good work out there, but the January part of that is he's had multiple funerals here in January to preach from
Yeah.
people either in his congregation or people that are just friends of the family and that sort of stuff. So he's had a rough week of it this week from that. Made me think about, when you're in January and it's kind of dark and it's kind of cold, and it's easy to kind of give in to tiredness and thoughts, especially when there's a lot of illness going around. There's a lot of political unrest that can affect you too. Try to find something to get away from that stuff, or and fill your cup back up, like Bobby said.
Yeah.
Any way you can
Yeah.
do that's good. So thinking about January and being cold, I had a couple of little things I wanted to talk about winter storms. Again, pointing back up here to the
Yep.
snow in my window. I think our last episode was before our what we were going to
Mhm.
call Snowmageddon. Well, last week we had a big winter storm that at my house, actually, it caused the power to go out for a couple of days, and it made it where it wasn't easy to travel. It was mostly ice, and that led to a lot of power lines being down, a lot of trees falling on power lines and that sort of stuff. And we've had a lot of folks who it's taken longer than 2 days to get their power back. And it made me want to talk a little bit about things you can do to stay safe during that time to stay warm. I just got a couple of small recommendations I wanted to throw out there. In our case, our most of our heat and we have an HVAC system that's all electric, and we were out that without it. Obviously, we had a couple of generators. Excuse me, we had one small generator that helped us out with that. I had lots of battery packs that I had available and ready to go before this happened, and I learned some things about how to get drop cords into your house. If you don't have a whole house generator set up, a lot of times you have to have a small generator sitting out in the yard running, and then you have large drop cords that you bring in to power things like your refrigerator for time, or small space heaters or things like that. And I found that one of the coolest ways to get that in your house without being too drafty or causing more cold. And we
Uh,
I am a fan of the pool noodle. I know that sounds crazy, but the pool noodle is a very, very useful tool
well, I
to
know
do
what you
all
did
kinds of
then.
things. Yeah.
I know
You know
exactly
what I
what you
did?
did.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I did was, and I wish I could show this, but I may find some photos of this and put them in the show notes later. But in one case, this worked with both generator drop cords and also with a tiny propane gas space heater that I had to help out with the cold. Pool noodles will let you make a gap in your window. You can raise a window a little bit, and you can bring a drop cord or a gas line through your window, and then use that pool noodle to encase that, and then drop your window down onto that pool noodle, and it will keep you from leaking cold air in, or leaking heat out of your house. It's one of the
Well, that's
handiest
cool.
$2 fixes ever that I've ever seen. So used that both for drop cords from the generator, and to power this little heater that I love, and I'm going to recommend because I'm going to throw it out there in our show notes. It's just something that's worked out for me. There's a company called Mr. Buddy that makes propane heaters that are unique in that they are rated safe to use indoors into certain circumstances. So they can be lifesavers during power outages, or really when you're trying to keep one room livable, if you treat them right and you don't get silly about it. So just because they're rated for indoor use doesn't mean you get to skip things like having carbon monoxide detectors around, and smoke detectors and that sort of stuff. You got to have those. The carbon monoxide thing is a big deal because it's kind of sneaky. You can't smell it. It can show up and cause problems with older adults, especially even before they realize that something's wrong. So they're really cheap. I think the one I bought, the carbon monoxide detector that I bought, was maybe $20 on Amazon. And it will, if it detects a problem, it will go really, really loudly and make sure that everybody knows that there's a problem. So that's a must if you're dealing with these little heaters. Another must is to keep ventilation up. You may have to crack a window to make sure you're getting oxygen in. A lot of these monitors are very good in that case, in that they will detect low oxygen in a room as well and set off alarms. So beyond just carbon monoxide, they do that. They can, in this case, the one that I bought could detect that there was propane or natural gas in the air. So it's a good thing that I recommend to get. I will put a link to that carbon monoxide detector in the show notes as well. But the whole thing is just you can mitigate these winter storms by some fairly inexpensive ways, as long as you're smart about it. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'll put a link to the things that actually worked out for me. Oh gosh, let's
Actually,
see here.
while we're talking about smart, I know a lot of people think, well, I can use my car to do some of this generation. And there's
Hmm.
some really good tips about what to do and what you can't do.
Yep.
First of all, we need to talk, re-emphasizing the whole idea about carbon monoxide kills people. You
Hmm.
should never run the car in the garage. You should never keep your exhaust pipe should be completely out of the ice and snow. When you run the car, do it at least 20 feet from the house. Crack a window if the car is fully outdoors. And if you feel nauseous, sick, sleepy for unknown reason, you need to turn off whatever you're doing and get fresh air immediately, because those are the only signs you might get of that kind of things. Um, you should
Even
not
if
use
you're,
your car to do space heaters or microwaves,
mhm.
refrigerators. Those are too big, too much amperage, and it's not going to work well. You can do things like, phone chargers, and laptops, and
Yeah,
LED
car
lamps.
alternators aren't made for that
They're
much
not made for
power
that kind.
output.
They only do
Yep.
about 400 watts at most of
Yep.
amperage from a converter. So you need to be careful about it. So I'm gonna throw some stuff in the notes about that. So if you're thinking about using your car, there's some definite no's about that kind of thing. and make sure you all do all the things you can to operate
Along
safely.
with that, the 20 feet from the house thing, I think, is a very important thing.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a small thing I didn't think a whole lot about before, but when I was doing some research getting ready for the storm, ChatGPT, our friend, pointed out some very specific things here. And I think this applies to cars. I think it also applies to generators. That you need to get them 10 to 20 feet away from the house in the case of generators. You need to make sure that the exhaust is pointed away from the house if you can. And also think about the fact that carbon monoxide it doesn't have a smell, but it's also heavier than air. So it sinks. All right. So if you think about that and you look at the terrain, if you're in a case where maybe you have a generator or your car's sitting outside and it's uphill from your house, think about that carbon monoxide maybe going to the ground and then sliding downhill toward your house where it might get sucked up into vents and things like that. So that also can cause you trouble. So even if you're running a generator outside, it's not a bad idea to have a carbon monoxide detector inside just to
Absolutely.
check to make sure you're not accidentally backflowing some of that stuff. So I
And
think
never do any of
that's
this while
important.
you're sleeping. Don't
Yeah,
ever set this up and then go to bed. That's
yeah,
not. This is things you do while you're awake and you can react.
for
So,
sure. All right, man. Gosh, let's see what I got. Anything that's on my list over here? I think we've covered a lot of it today. So hopefully by the next time we're back, we'll be back out of Snowmageddon and the sun will be shining again. And I think by the time the next time we put out a new episode, it'll be out of January. So that'll be
yeah,
a good thing. And hopefully we'll little closer to spring, getting ready for that. Right. I'm trying to think. I'm traveling next week but I'll be back in time for us to do the next episode. So we'll get it out on time. And till then though, I hope that if any of you guys are listening out there and have any comments, we'd love it if you would comment on our YouTube videos. That actually helps us with the algorithm and
yeah,
any kind of reviews that you can do on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. We would love to hear from you. Even if you just like to email us at caretechandtips@gmail.com. We always love to hear from the community.
absolutely. And make
Yep.
sure if you're on YouTube, subscribe and go
Yep.
ahead and get notified, all those things, because that helps us keep the algorithm pointed to us and that allows us to do more. So, hey,
That's right. That's right. I've noticed back on our analytics, we still have a sturdy listenership in Singapore and lots of new places in the United States that I haven't seen before. So that's pretty cool. We haven't added any new countries in the last week, but it's nice to see different cities and different regions around the US as well. So anyway, we're that's us. That's it for us for today. And hope y'all have a good rest of your January and we'll see you soon.
yeah, goodbye, everybody. Stay warm.